Hey team, welcome back to the show. Today is Natalie, Andrea, and I once again, and we're going to be talking about our favorite training splits for maximizing gains, getting people super jacked. Love talking about this. I think we all love training. And I'll say a lot of people, before they start coaching, are leaving gains on the table. Oftentimes because exercise selection sucks, but also we can very often not have the right split to match our goals and our ability to recover. It is quite common, I would say realistically, that people are training too much, but not actually getting enough out of the single training days we're doing. We'll talk about that a little bit more later on. But really making sure that your split actually matches your goals, your ability to recover. People just always think more is better, where, as I was saying, a lot of times more is actively worse and is a big part of what is holding people back when they start. So by the end of this episode, you'll know best 3, 4, 5 day week splits, how to bring up priority muscle groups or lagging muscle groups without overdoing it, what your frequency should look like, and more. So if you are someone who is still following a bro split, or if you're training 6 to 7 days a week, you're constantly sore but you're never progressing, this episode is for you. Before we get into it, any super important personal updates y'all want to talk through, or are everybody's lives still boring? Still boring?
I got
Cool.
more food, Natalie got less food.
My food is the same.
That's the update.
Cool. More exciting updates for everybody next week. Let's kick it off by talking through what are we looking for in a training split. Now, I just kind of brain dumped the initial part of this, so feel free to please jump in wherever. But when we're looking at a training split that is effective for building muscle, there are a couple key variables or kind of a couple boxes we want to tick to make it most effective. So first is going to be frequency. So in terms of how frequently we're training a muscle, probably at least twice a week is going to be ideal. In certain cases, maybe 3 days a week if we're really biasing in tissue. The thing to understand here is when we're looking at training volume, so basically the number of hard sets we're doing, because this is very much like volume, intensity, frequency, recovery, all very much related here. Training volume does have diminishing returns when it comes to the stimulus we get. So like the first set of a movement, probably where we get a large majority of the stimulus from, then every additional set from there, not that we don't get anything out of these sets, but like the second set, do I get as much stimulus as the first set? No. Third set, fourth set, fifth set, you get the idea. There's just a point of diminishing returns here. Not to say we should only ever like do one set of a movement, but again, that first set is where we get like most of the juice. So like us doing like, if we were like, hey, I'm so pinched on time this week, and like one set, we're going to, if we can like push one set quite hard, where I normally do 2 sets of movement, I'm probably going to get like most of the stimulus there. I can be confident and maybe maintained. There's a lot of variables there, but anyways, this is where we get the majority of the benefits. So training a muscle group twice or 3 days a week, if we can recover, likely means more gains at the same volume, due to us again hitting this, like us having multiple instances where we're hitting that first set of said movement, right? Rather than like so let's say I was doing 8 sets of chest in one training session, or 4 sets of chest in 2 training sessions, I would get more out of that latter option. But alongside that, we're going to be fresher, we're going to be able to push harder. There's very much again a point of diminishing returns for volume and getting into junk volume after that. So typically us splitting our volume up to a degree rather than just hammering a muscle group with a ton of volume in a single training day and not training it again for like 6, 7 days is going to be more ideal. But again, this is very much going to tie back to how well we recover. I would say typically my default for most people, I think like the best option for most people is twice a week frequency. I think when we're getting to 3 days a week, we have to be quite cautious with the way we're approaching it. And oftentimes like we might have to pull back, and like if we want to just build across the board, as most people need to, and it makes the most sense for most people, twice a week is great. If we're getting to like 3 days a week, and especially if we're looking at like your glutes, we typically have to pull back elsewhere and have to be okay with more or less maintaining other tissues a lot of times is what I find. So important consideration with frequency. Anything to add there before we continue? Or I can kind of just rattle all this off and then we'll get into considerations, anything you all have. So next we have volume, which I would define as the number of hard sets per muscle group we're doing per week. Now, within the training split that we have, so again, we want frequency. So ideally, like any priority muscle groups we're training, ideally we're training everything twice a week, but at very least priority muscle groups at least twice a week. Volume, we want enough room for adequate volume to stimulate growth. Now, the issue we can run into when we're looking at what training split we're doing is, like, let's say you're only training 3 days a week. We can just run into issues in terms of, do I have enough time to allocate the volume we need to build everything? Now, if we're like, the newer we are, the easier this is. But I think of like, and I'll give an example of how I might approach this later on to work around this. But I think of like a more advanced client I have. So my guy has been working with me for 6 years now, built a lot of muscle. We're only training 3 days a week. Now for him, if I were to do like a 3-day a week full body, it's a lot harder, because for me to really touch on, especially like if upper body is a priority, for me to touch on like our delts, biceps, triceps, multiple divisions of the pec, which would require different movements, like the lats, the upper back, and his lower body. Just so many movements for us to squeeze in. And even when we're looking into squeezing that into like 3 training days, it is quite a bit harder, like from a full body perspective. But then we could also go with something like, okay, so for him in the past, what we've done is like an upper, lower, upper. So problem there is lower body is very much on the back burner, really not progressing a whole lot. Upper body, bigger priority. But again, like in the ideal world, we could be training everything with twice a week frequency and moving along a little bit quicker across the board. So, I mean, when it comes to volume, let's actually talk about like how we might decide if we're doing too much or too little volume a little bit later on. That's our biggest consideration, right? Is like, at least for our priority muscle groups, does the split allow us to drive adequate volume to the tissues that we want to grow? And at very least, are we able to maintain these that aren't a priority? Then we have recovery. So if a muscle isn't sufficiently recovered after we train it, we are going to have some nervous system fatigue that carries over to the next session. And that is going to hurt your ability to recruit motor units and basically fully recruit and fatigue the muscle fibers within said muscle group in the movement that we're doing. So thus we won't get as good of a stimulus. So we get a lot less out of that set and like whatever movements we're doing for that muscle group, if again, we aren't recovered going into that session. Now, recovery will be quite dependent on things like our exercise selection. So like the systemic demand of the movement, like a hack squat is probably going to take us longer to recover from than a leg extension. Especially muscle groups that we can really, or movements that really allow us to train the eccentric phase at long muscle lengths. So think like a Romanian deadlift. We get a nasty stretch on our hamstrings. There's a lot of tension at a longer muscle length at the bottom movement when the hamstrings and glutes are stretched quite well. Okay, that might be movement that takes us a little bit longer to recover from. Volume, the more volume we do as well, typically the longer it's going to take us to recover. So good rule of thumb for us is typically going to be like 2 to 4 days between training a tissue. Probably ideal if we like really are. And I mean, we can really look at like our recovery. An easy recovery checklist would be, okay, the next time I train this muscle group, or like week to week, is this movement progressing? Or at very least, like let's say like I train my hack squat on Wednesdays and I train like legs earlier the week on Sundays or Mondays as well. Okay, week to week, is that consistently progressing? Or does it seem to be held back by what I'm doing the day prior or the couple days prior? How long our DOMs or how long soreness sticks around can also be a pretty good rule of thumb here. Like typically, if we are sore for 2 days or less, pretty good sign like we might be around the right amount of volume. If we're over like past that and it's not like a new novel movement, we didn't do something drastically different, typically a good sign we might be doing a little bit too much. I would say like in the micro setting, those are the biggest things I'm looking for. Longer term, like bigger picture, if we like need to deload, there's things like sleep quality, digestion we will look at as well. But like in the more micro setting here of like determining like how this impacts our frequency, there's a couple things I would be looking at. I think all this is going to make a lot more sense when we get into the next section. But I guess the last piece to consider here is practicality for the client, which is most important when we're looking at this from a coaching lens is, does it actually work with this person's, not just their physique goals, but also our life stressors, our time availability, etc. Right? If it's like, hey, this is the busiest person I know, they're crazy stressed, they don't have a lot of time to sleep, and I'm trying to push them into like this 6 day a week, super high frequency split that we aren't going to be able to do super well with unless we have a ton of recovery and like those variables are optimal, we're gonna have a bad time. We're not gonna progress. So that's the biggest thing here is the actual practicality and like how well this fits you. All right. Anything to add there from either of you two? All right, so let's get into a quick fire segment quick before we talk about our own current training splits. Andrea, what would you say is one pet peeve of yours in training program design, split design?
I don't know if I have a ton of pet peeves when it comes to this, but because there's so many different ways you can do it successfully. But one thing I would say is like I have minimal time. I need to train 2 to 3 days a week, but I also want to put a big focus on my abs and my arms and,
Person
XYZ and
lists
like
off
really
every
hit
muscle
every
group.
single thing. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool.
That's because it's just there's got to be a trade-off. And if there's less frequency, sometimes those kind of things that are like your arms, for example, they're just going to have to take a back burner if we want to also get in volume for like the major muscle groups, and they'll get a little bit of they'll get like maintenance volume just pulling, like they're involved
Rapid
pulling and
fire
pushing.
here.
Sorry.
That's
That's
quite all
my
right.
answer.
That's quite all right. You crushed it. I fully agree. Natalie, pet peeve.
Say overcomplicating and nitpicking split. So there are many roads to Rome. I mean, if this is quick fire, I'm gonna leave it at that.
Well done. I love it.
All right.
I think it can be quite easy to always be changing your split, always look, well, I saw this movement was more optimal on Instagram, and we're just never there. Yes, there are many roads to Rome, but we need to actually take the time to get really good at whatever movements, like whatever split, like almost anything can work for us well, given it's not just like a stupid program, given it's a reasonable
Why
program.
are you allowed to expand on this?
I'm the moderator because you took my point.
So
Uh,
rude.
we can
Continue, please.
almost now my train of thought is just completely wrecked. Anyways, there are many roads to Rome, but yes, I think getting too fixated on that, like is the optimal split, constant variance, because we're chasing more optimal, is very suboptimal. Andrea, one instant upgrade most clients can make this week in terms of training splits.
The split, I would say, since most people need pretty much everything to grow, hitting that twice a week frequency. If we're just talking split and not exercise selection.
Love it. Natalie?
I would say hire a coach.
That's a better answer.
Because, and I will expand upon this unless I'm stealing Jeremiah's answer again.
Yeah,
Quickly,
so I think hiring a coach is sorry, go on.
I've had a lot of conversations, like onboarding conversations with new clients. We're having that initial like meet and greet kind of thing, and we're talking through things. And something that comes up frequently is like, yeah, I just don't know, like, when should I add a set? Like, how many times should I be hitting this? How many? And I'm like, dude, it's not your job to know this. It's mine. Like, why do you think you need to know all of these things? Like, I think there is a perception in like the nutrition fitness space that like we can kind of DIY this sort of thing, but it's like if only we had professionals that did this for a living. Like, you don't need to stress about this. Like, that's my job. So that's why that's my answer.
Love it. I somewhat similar, I would say, do less volume for most people. Almost everyone starts doing way too much volume, and intensity and effort, or intensity, effort, same thing. Intensity and execution are not good. We're just focused on getting through these 5 sets of whatever movement we're doing. Drop that down to 1 to 2 sets. Nail your execution. You only have like 1 to 2 chances to get it right here. Push it hard. You'll get so much more out of your training. All right, best rapid fire type thing I think we've done so far. All right, so let's talk through our current training splits first before we get into like a lot more things we do with clients. Pros, cons, and kind of just details of what we're doing. I feel like I've been talking a lot. Andrea, I'll let you take this away first. Fill us in, what you're up to.
Okay. So my split, is a little bit complicated because it's specific to training for bikini. And so mine is the microcycle length is just as needed, basically. So it's not on a 7-day cycle. And so it'll be different each week. So first training day is full lower body. Second training day is upper anterior, so push. Then posterior, so there's a pull and then glutes. Then shoulders and pull, which is shoulders and back. And then glutes and then glutes. So how I do this is I'll train a day and then I'll rest 1 to 2 days, unless it is happens to fall on 2 days where I'm training back to back and it's up or lower. Then I'll go 2 days in a row. But most of the time I train and then I rest 1 to 2 days. And so the pros of this is it's very specific to my current goal, the body parts that I need to build. And then the upper body days come as like really when I'm needing a break from the lower body days. So on the where I go glutes, and then full lower body day, by that anterior upper body day, I'm really needing it. And so that ends up working out really well for my recovery. And then rest days, they're technically written into my programming, but they're as needed. And so I always take my check-in days off from the gym, and then I'll always take that 1 to 2 days between the two lower body. Is this supposed to be rapid fire? Is that why you're smiling?
Nope.
Okay. And so it ends up just being very personalized and works out really well for my schedule. Cons here, though, this is hard to recover from because it's a lot of lower body movement, and you have to manage the rest days really well. And for a lot of people, the longer microcycle doesn't work out very well because some people just need it to work on a 7-day microcycle where they're doing the same things on the same day each week. So for a lot of people, doing something completely different, like which days are rest days and which days are training days, and or which days are training which muscle groups, is different every single week. Just has to be a specific type of situation, which online coaching tends to work out really well for.
So you're training, you have 6 different training days with full lower, upper anterior,
Yeah.
posterior, upper shoulders and pull, glutes and glutes.
Yep.
How many days is that typically spread across total? Like 12? 14?
Yeah, about 12.
Okay.
11, 12.
Okay. So it's what, like 3 to 4 training days per week typically?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it sounds like that's somewhat reactive based on how you're recovering.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know why I feel like your split always still just confuses me as far as like, wait, how does it work? So, but it makes
Same.
complete sense when you lay it out here. I need like a mind map of it. Anything else to add there? Like thoughts, questions for Andrea, Natalie?
Well, I will just quickly add one more thing is this also doesn't work if you're missing days.
Yeah.
Because if I have like 2 weeks between my first full lower body day, or 2.5, 3 weeks between the two times that I hit that, I'm going to be so sore. So like I had to be very consistent. And if somebody is missing training days and has this sort of training setup, it's going to be a disaster.
I think this is definitely like it's super cool, but it for sure is for someone who is very dialed into like the whole lifestyle of this. All right, Natalie, talk us through what your training looks like.
So I train 5 times per week, and it's just like an upper lower push pull legs pretty much. Um, is the easiest way to say it, but the way that mine's broken down is like lower with emphasis on like posterior, upper, and then I'm supposed to rest, and then lower quads, and then pull push rest. So I do have rest days stipulated. I am that person who mentally really likes to be on a 7-day conventional week. And a lot of it is because I'm such a creature of routine and habit, and I like predictability. So like I know exactly how long this session is going to take. And like I kind of like I'm that kind of nerd who like mentally rehearses lifts and things. And like I envision like how my day is gonna go. Like I said, I really like predictability because I'm really structured. I live my life like in a very specific certain way. Some might call that rigid and inflexible, but it works for me. So theoretically, the way that these rest days are stipulated, it would be like a rotating microcycle if I adhered to it. You know what I mean? But what I end up doing is like, okay, every Sunday is my lower day. Every Wednesday is quads. And so that works out to training 5 times a week. Um, and that's the way that I like it. So to get into the pros, I like to train. So 5 out of 7 days I get to train. I get to be at the gym. That makes me happy. It's also a split that's pretty specific to the figure division, which I am competing in. So emphasis on like lats. Everything's kind of getting enough volume. Fortunately, I seem to, at least for right now, I seem to grow pretty evenly. Like, so I'm not necessarily on any kind of like specialization, so to speak. So my volume it is specific to the figure division and like the muscle groups that are, given more emphasis and importance, but it's also like fairly even. 5 days is I would say like ideal in terms of like living in a vacuum and getting to include all the things. It's not ideal if that doesn't fit in your life. So like if it's destroying relationships for you to make it to the gym 5 days a week, I would say like not ideal, right? But I'm talking about like if you're living in a bubble in a vacuum, you can get a lot done in a 5 day split in
This is
terms of
why
like
we don't have a better relationship, though. You're always
yeah,
training.
like if you're like me and you have zero life, like it's perfect. And all your friends, like my only friends are gym friends, so like it all just works for me. And I put as a pro like there are only 2 leg days. And they are hard,
That
make
is a
no
big
mistake.
pro.
Yeah, I really don't want to do more than that. Um, for cons of this split, I would say because of how I kind of just talked through like how I approach there's just less flexibility. So when I get clients who come in and they're like, I really want to train 5 times a week, like that's what I like to do. I have to talk through like what their jobs look like, what their life looks like, what are your rest days, because a lot of times I'll get a client who is like, "Oh, well, I train Monday through Friday." And I'm like, "Yeah, I don't necessarily want you to train 5 times in a row." Like just because of recovery. Like I
Agreed.
totally get it. You're like it's pretty easy for people to lock in Monday through Friday because they're in their like work routine, of like, oh, and then I wake up, go to the gym, and then I go to work. And like I understand that. But if we're talking about truly impactful, effective training, we need some recovery built in there. So um and then and even someone who's like no, but I'm like so into this and like I'm cool with working out on the weekend so like I can split up and have those rest days interjected. Then something that I talk through is like, okay, well, what kind of flexibility do you need? Like, are you someone who every now and again needs to miss a session? Because for me, because of the way I execute this, like I said, like I'm not flexible. Like what I admittedly could and should do more often than not is like if I need an extra recovery day, take the extra recovery day and then just hit that session the next day. And again, that just shifts the whole cycle if you're following my logic there. So like
Hmm.
I train quads every Wednesday. Okay. Well, let's say like I make it to next Wednesday and like my recovery is just like in the toilet, right? Okay, well like theoretically then I could just take an extra rest day and hit quads on Thursday or Friday. Like I could do that. I don't I don't like that because of how I started off this conversation saying like I really like the predictability of like every Wednesday I do quads, this is how long it takes me, this is what I'm doing kind of thing. Obviously, if I'm sick, if I truly need a recovery day, I will take one. But my point is if you're someone who's like constantly like needs to miss a session for whatever reason, it's a jigsaw puzzle of like how are you going to fit this in now? Because now it's like you miss the session. Cool. Now we are training like 4 days in a row, which is not ideal. Sort of thing. So there's just a real like lack of flexibility and I currently like really like to train on the weekends because I don't have work, so I can take my time and like, I'm not rushing through anything. So again, very, very set structure, but that also means like I don't do a whole lot on the weekends. Like that's what I do. And so if you're living and breathing this stuff, cool. If you're trying to do some other things like, I don't know, go for a hike or do something social, this might not be for you. And again, this is the combination of this split with the way that I execute this split. So I'll be very specific there. And then along with that, I would say some of the cons are that kind of like what you were talking through at the beginning, Jeremiah, is some muscle groups get a lot of volume because, I'm doing like a push, a pull kind of thing, like a quads. So there is the opportunity and danger for a lot of redundancy. So kind of, making sure that like I'm not venturing into junk volume territory and that like everything that I'm doing in my back day is productive and not just like beating the proverbial dead horse there.
Sure. I really like the upper lower push pull lower split, but yeah, you do have to be very aware of our ability to recover and yeah, making sure we're not just running things into the ground. This worked out well with all of us having quite different splits actually. So I currently follow a 4-day a week upper body and then a lower and bicep split. So I'm not training biceps on my upper body. Start my lower body days with biceps before going into lower body. I was for the last couple of years following an upper lower push pull lower, which I do really, really enjoy and probably will get back to shortly. This is something that I wanted to experiment with. I wanted to see how it impacted my progress relative to what I had seen over the last couple of years with an upper lower push pull lower. Just digging more into, I mean, it's been my work with Kyle after our photo shoot has been interesting in like taking volume lower initially than I had done before. It was really cool to see like, wow, I'm progressing crazy well here, like better than I have in the past. Okay, cool. Let's like, what if we, because also like what I've consistently run into is, and this has especially been the last couple of years, I've talked to you guys about this, especially the last year with like, we've been basically renovating a house in our free time. And I'm always like doing a lot of actual like physical labor, like on the weekends. And I think that's a big part of it. But I was consistently finding after like, have really like 4 or 5 really very very productive weeks of training and then would kind of just hit a wall around like week 7ish, week 6 to week 7ish, and need to deload a lot quicker than I would expect to. Now I'm only I think I'm 11 weeks into the split now, but it's still like recovering, progressing quite well. It's not enough time to actually gauge like, do I like it better? I do miss the like upper lower push pull lower split because I do like being in the gym. So I'd say there's pros and cons here. Again, like pros so far, I would say for my life right now, it's been easier to recover from. And again, it's like a lot of the things I'm doing, like, okay, after work, I'm gonna go like side our house or like jackhammer these boulders out of our yard. Like that type of stuff is just not ideal for the recovery. And I like to think it doesn't impact me, but I think that's a big part of it. Like in a normal situation, I don't think this would be the case. But it has been ongoing for quite a while. So I for sure have noticed like going in each session, I feel like train less. So you're like really, really stoked for your actual training sessions and like ready to push, train hard, feel good physically, mentally. It's also nice, like before I was training Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Now I do Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday. So like you, Natalie, when you were talking about that, I was like, oh shit, I kind of forgot that if I like needed an extra recovery day, I could like push things back a day and I have more flexibility with this, but I just don't like how it messes with the rest of my schedule. But it is nice to like, normally the mornings when I would go train on like Sundays, I just hang out with my wife now. We like have a new routine where we like go for this beautiful walk in an area over by our house. That's cool. So yes, more room for stuff outside of training. Recovery has been nice. Again, just want longer time to like see how I actually feel like I progress versus like the upper lower push pull lower. Cons would be it is harder to squeeze in upper body volume. So the beauty of, and as you mentioned, also like the potential obstacle we can run into with like an upper lower push pull lower versus this, they're not that different. It just basically gives us that upper lower push pull lower that 5 days a week, gives us an extra training day for more upper body volume. We have a push day and a pull day. Whereas here, my sessions, like per session, my upper body sessions are a decent bit longer. I got like a 5-6 movements in a training session with like a upper lower push pull lower split is nice. On the upper lower split now, we might be like doing 8 movements per session, right? To be able to squeeze everything in. Not that that's a necessity, but like that's just how Kyle has my training laid out. So it is a little bit longer per session. And again, it's less specific to any one tissue, which I do really love, just hitting like a push day or a pull day. So you do have to still at the end of that session, I think, be more intentional about making sure the quality isn't dropping off, because it is easier to happen as the session gets longer versus like those push and pull sessions where they're shorter. Any other thoughts? Anything else to add there? Cool. Okay. Let's get into then a few new and different approaches to training splits we've been implementing recently with clients. I will start unless anyone else wants to. Cool. All right. So something that I have been finding to be quite effective. This is more specific to anyone who wants to build their upper body. So in practice, this is played out for a lot more of my male clients, but for someone who wants to train, and you could do this, like I've actually used this both ways for lower body specialization as well, now that I think of it. But I have a decent amount of clients who are a little bit more advanced, but do still only want to train 3 days a week. Now, would I still recommend this as ideal? No. I would rather we like have more, at least 4 training days a week if we're like really like gains are the main goal here. But basically what I've been doing here is, so in this example, we have a torso limbs split. So basically this is 4 training sessions spread across 9 days. So again, like I used the example of my client earlier where, hey, we want to prioritize upper body. We're only training 3 days a week. So we could do like upper, lower, but lower body really taking a back burner there more than I would like. So and we're only getting once a week frequency for that. So what we're doing here, we have torso day 1, which would be pecs, delts, back, basically. Limbs day 1, which would be legs and arms. So biceps, triceps, lower body. Torso 2, limbs 2. And then how we would spread that out is, let's say Monday, we do our first torso day. Wednesday, we do our first limbs day. Friday, we do our second torso day. Let's say this person trains Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then that following Monday, we would do our second limbs day. And then, so it's basically, again, like 4 training days spread across 9 days rather than 7. So it's a microcycle rather than a training week. So your calendar week is 9 days. And then we just start it over, right? So then like they're basically starting the next training microcycle on Wednesday. So the cool thing about this is we're still training every muscle group every 5 days. So like I'm touching on my torso stuff Tuesday and Saturday. I'm touching on my limb stuff Thursday and then the next Tuesday. So we still have like very good frequency within the week. Still touching on everything consistently. Gonna be more ideal. I've like been really stoked on the progress people have been making on this. I for sure think it's like superior to like just an upper, lower, upper. Really good from a recovery perspective. We just don't run into that traditional problem with 3 days a week training of trying to make adequate volume and frequency for upper body specifically work without sacrificing lower body. So this has been a really cool solution there. Any thoughts, questions on that? Cool. Andrea, talk us through what you got. Anything new, different you've been implementing?
I do have a handful of aspiring bikini competitors, and so they need higher frequency glutes, but theirs look quite a bit different than mine does, just for the practicality aspect of it. So I have Ashley doing 3 lower body days and 1 upper body day. One of her lower body days though is posterior, so she still hits like her rear delts and her back there. So that lower body day is lower volume of her actual glutes than the 2 other lowers. So that's how we're managing fatigue. So it's full lower, full upper, posterior, and then full lower. And then I've got Andy, who is basically hitting lower body every single day. But again, like we're managing fatigue by having a couple of those lower. Sorry, go ahead.
How many days a week?
4.
Okay.
But it is lower posterior, full lower, posterior and shoulders, and then glutes, quads, and rear delts. So she's not ever doing like two squats back to back or any like squat patterns back to back, or even like the bigger, heavier glute movements back to back. She doesn't ever have that, but she is touching lower body or glutes every single day in some form or fashion. And that's worked really, really well for her. Her glute med has come up a ton, which is really like
Hard to
rounded out
do.
her glutes nicely. Yeah.
Yeah, she's made crazy progress with her lower body stuff. With that, I think one of the biggest things as well is like you're not pushing her upper body to make a ton of progress, and you're very. It's not like we have these or four lower body days basically, and then I'm also doing two or three full upper body days on top of that, right? We have to be very intentional about like,
Exactly.
can we actually recover from this? I've had people as well like touch on like 4 day a week frequency with glutes, especially, and it can work well if you're okay with pulling back on upper body.
Hmm.
Cool. Natalie, what you got?
Really have anyone doing anything like unconventional or crazy. I do have a couple people, like my client Melissa. We just started a new training block for her. Melissa was someone who, and I've posted about her progress. We found this sweet spot with her recovery where like she just did honestly biofeedback was just so much better when she was only training 3 times per week. But kind of like what and she had been on a 4 day a week split. And of course, there are other considerations there, what we're doing on the nutrition side of things, like life stuff, but things just like really synced up when we pulled her back to 3 times per week. But she's really serious about muscle building. And so everything that we've discussed earlier in the podcast about, one of the cons of like a 3 times per week split is like you're missing out on volume, for like per muscle group kind of thing. So she's someone who we just kind of like shifted over to that like microcycle model where it's like, okay, we have like 4 training days, but we're only training 3 times per week kind of thing. And she doesn't mind that like rotating shift. And it's just been honestly like so great to be able to touch on more muscle groups more frequently for her. So, and we just started it. So I'm excited to see how that goes for her, but I predict that it's going to go well. And then I guess the only other thing, and we've touched on this in other podcasts, but I do seem to have like a lot of runners on my roster. And they're all getting into like their race seasons and stuff. So, I have someone, my client Sarah, who was training 4 times a week, and now we're pulling her back to 3. Um, and like my client Joni, who I talk about all the time, and like I always go back and forth with them, on how I want to structure those 3 days. Like, do I want to do what I'm doing with Melissa, where it's like, hey, maybe we are trading like 4 different days spread out a little bit more. But particular considerations there with like lower body training because their legs are just going to take a beating. So that might be a scenario where honestly, for a lot of my runners, I like an upper lower full because that way, like the upper day is a completely like legs off situation. But I also like an idea there of doing like an upper lower upper. And it's like, hey, this could just be a really great opportunity to like go ham on some upper body, like really hit like delts and lats, build a good upper, and just kind of accept that, we're not going to be pushing lower body right now. I think that can work super well too.
That's the dream.
Yeah. Yeah, seriously.
I no, I the like spreading it across 9 days rather than seven just seems like such a logical solution for the issues you run into. Typically, someone can only train 3 days a week. Since I've been programming this, I'm like, why did I not think of this more? I can have so many examples of
Like
this. Go ahead.
same. I'm like, why don't I do this more? And like everything that Andrea was saying earlier, like today, about how one of those like a lot of people who train 3 times a week, they're like, oh, can we hit abs? Like, why aren't we doing biceps? Why aren't we? And it's like, dude, we only have like 3 days. Like,
Right.
we got to move some big rocks before we like do an ab specialization phase or something. But yeah, I'm liking this so far and probably will implement it more.
I have another client who comes to mind, Celia, who she's like a former competitor and did a photo shoot prep. She crushed it, and she just really lower body, especially, is a big priority for her. Same thing though, like recovery is a little bit harder to come by. So she's obviously more advanced, but that's like we have been training. What is it? It's like it's posterior anterior is how we have it split up, but it's like 4 days a week or 4 training sessions across 9 days. And then we basically have days that are more, I might actually have, I need to look back at her split. I might actually have like more posterior dominant lower body and then push and then lats and quads. I think that's actually how I have it split up. It is because we don't need as much to like hit the quads versus or the lats or excuse me the quads versus like posterior. So that gives us more time for lats in those days. But it is this like 4 training days across 9 days, and then basically we are training lower body every time that we train. Yes, but it's like we always have a rest day in between. And then I've been kind of alternating. So like I have one day where like her quads are literally, and this is specific to her, so it'd be very dependent. She goes hard, so and she just responded very well. But like one of her days where we're training quads is literally just the prime leg extension, like more length than biased. I think just like 2 to 3 sets there, and then we have basically the more posterior focused lower body day prior, pushing that much harder, and then just alternating like head more, basically more fatiguing, less fatiguing, like between our like posterior, anterior. That's worked super well also. I feel like I would need to lay out an example. I hope that made sense somewhat. Cool. All right, let's get into a quick roundtable here. What would y'all say is your most programmed split for Gym Pop clients?
Upper lower, for sure.
Core
Because as
Right.
Natalie said, even for people with 3 days a week, a lot of times I'm doing upper lower, upper lower, upper lower, and we just split it out for longer.
I think like for almost everyone, like universally, again, like that's basically I'm the split that I'm following. There's slight variations of it. Like, hey, we can if we have like a little bit more upper body focus, we can put biceps or triceps or both on our lower body days. Like that torso
Mhm.
limb split is basically just an upper lower split as well. I also
Yeah,
have
it's funny
clients who
you
are
named it that way.
just sounds different. I know torso limb sounds like cadavers for some reason is what it reminds me of. But anyways, it's basically the same thing. We're just doing arms on the lower body day. But again, it's a good way for us to like spread that volume out more. But I feel like all goals like lower body, if like we're really prioritizing lower body, it works very well. Like there's just so much we can do with that. Most people can
Yeah,
recover
even
from it
people on
well.
some glute specific training, I'll still have upper lower. It's just like we're really skewing it towards the glutes, and like sometimes we'll do a hip thrust on an upper body day. It's just very customizable.
Yeah, I
I
know
find with
all of us like we use upper lower a lot, but we all sort of dabble elsewhere where like a lot of times like we'll just throw an extra delt volume like on a
mhm,
lower body day, for example,
Yeah.
because it's like the delts, middle delt specifically, excuse me, can like take a bit of a beating. Like they're gonna recover really quickly. Like it's not gonna hurt us to like push volume there. And like you were saying with like arm volume, if we want like an extra set of biceps or triceps or something like that, like that's just so easy to stash on a lower body day. Or like again, maybe glutes are a priority, so it's like, hey, we can add some like glute med kickbacks or like
done that a ton
AB,
too.
yeah, abductions on an upper body day, and it's just not that big a deal.
Yeah, a very versatile split. Just for any goal, even if we are a little bit more advanced, I find almost everyone can progress extremely well here. Uh, if the goal is maximizing upper body gains, y'all have a favorite in terms of splits.
I like a 5 day if someone can do it.
Like an
Yeah.
Because
upper lower, push pull lower.
yeah, like everything that we talked through. Because there's so much that you can do. There's a lot to fit in.
I would fully agree. I think for upper body, that's the goal. Upper lower, push pull lower is definitely going to be my go-to. I don't really like an upper lower upper when we're actually training everything upper body 3 days a week, and then it's like there is like such little recovery time between like training those tissues, because then it's like the next week we have like a one rest day typically, and then we're back to like hitting full upper again. It's I find people struggle with that more. I myself have, where like that twice a week frequency is really nice, but yes, plenty of time to like bias all the different tissues of the lats, the divisions of the pec, like more tricep bicep specific work if that's really our goal.
I
Favorite
think
from Maxim.
anterior posterior can work really well there too. I don't have a ton of men, and I don't use this a lot because I don't have very many people who just want to prioritize upper. But I think anterior posterior can work really well if you want to maximize either upper body or lower body, because you can really customize that quite a bit too without the overlap in
Yeah.
body parts.
Okay. I have not run that a whole lot with upper body prioritization in mind, honestly.
I haven't either, but I think it could work really well. I
Um,
have done
fa-
it with lower though.
I have a ton with lower. So speaking of favorite split for maximizing lower body gains, what do you got for us, Andrea?
Yeah, I would say, well, no, I wouldn't say that's my favorite one. Favorite, I would say either lower upper lower, or like the glute specialization that I mentioned. I've got Ashley on, where it's like 3 lower body days and 1 upper, but one of the lower body days is kind of more evenly split full body.
Natalie?
Say lower, upper, lower. I agree with that one.
Like a 3 day a week.
Yeah, because again, it just like for most of my clients, taking into consideration like everything that we talk through in terms of like lifestyle scheduling, predictability, like all of those things.
I would
But
agree,
I honestly could
actually.
answer upper lower for all 3 of these questions too, because
Yeah,
I would
yeah,
say that's
right.
what I most often do. Is even though I that glute specialization might be maybe like my favorite one, practicality wise, and for just what most people need, because most people don't need 3 times a week frequency yet. Upper lower is still my go-to for most.
You can just do within any split. So take like upper lower, right? Like within any split, you can just do so much with volume within
Yeah.
that as well. So like how are you allocating volume throughout? So I guess the whole point here is that like many roads lead to Rome. There are so many different ways that this could work.
For sure. My answer would actually, that's what I was gonna say as well, is like I think the idea of specializing or specialization is sexy, but very few people actually need it. Most people who like are trying to build their lower body are training like lower body 3 to 4 days a week, and it's like, dude, our quality isn't good. We're also at the same time like we're not recovered super well. We will get so much more out of just doing 2 training sessions for lower body a week, maximizing our intensity, our execution. And if we're really like doing that well, unless all we care about is building lower body, which again, like Andrew mentioned, specific cases where like that is by far the biggest priority. But for a lot of people, it is like realize it or not. Some new clients will be like, I just really want to build my lower body. I don't want to build my upper. And then like the goal physiques they'll submit are like, okay, well, realize it or not, we actually want to build upper as a lot as well. I again find like some variation of like upper, lower, upper, lower, upper, lower almost always makes the most sense, like 90% of the time. Cool. Anything else to add there? Or any final thoughts?
I think most people also, whether they kind of acknowledge it or not, do have some sort of like health, wellness, longevity goal in mind. And so, like, as a health and wellness professional, I feel like to some extent I have a responsibility to make sure that they're getting elements of well-roundedness from like a function perspective, you know? And it's like I don't ever really want to force someone to do something they truly don't enjoy. I think there are aspects to this of like, okay, well, we don't always enjoy like every single part of this process. Like if I never had to train glutes, like that'd be awesome. But I acknowledge that I do. But short of someone who's like training for a specific physique division for like a physique competition, that's where it's like, no, like I absolutely like need to prioritize glutes. But if you're not that person who's like trying to fit into a criteria, I think a conversation can be had about like, hey, I get that you want to prioritize this, you enjoy lower body training. Like, yes, we can definitely bias, glutes a little bit more in your program. However, like, I want to make sure that your shoulder function doesn't suck. Because when you're like 80 years old or whatever, like I don't want you to have shoulder pain. So I I do try. I think most people start coaching, especially our clients, because like you guys are all nerds for this stuff, and that's why we love you. But most of our clients who start, have a very specific idea of like, I really want to build my glutes or I really want to build my delts. And I do take that into account. Absolutely. That is important. But I do try to steer them toward a bit of a touch on like well-roundedness, so to speak. Like I said, there might be like a bias, but I am going to make a case for like, yeah, I get that you really want to build your delts, but like, trust me, like when you are older, if you lack function at the hip, this is problematic.
Or
Or like,
usually, sorry, talking through their initial program, a lot of times I'll talk through like, this is the specific goal for what we're building, and so we have these movements in here for this, but also we have this dip in here because that's going to help with shoulder
hmm
function, and that carries over into building your shoulders better and
hmm
better function, and if we function better, we build better. And I'll kind of talk through it, even though they're all for function and for hypertrophy. We kind of
hmm
talk through them in that way where it's like, we might not care if we build our pecs, but there's a reason for this in here. And then we've got this movement to really like build your glutes or build your shoulders.
hmm And like, runners who are like, oh, I don't like really want to build my legs, like, because I run. It's like, ooh, this is like why we should be doing some of this. So,
Yeah.
mm,
I think another big takeaway is all the splits we discussed were 3, 4 days a week, and then we used 5 day a week example. But so many people think that they just need to train more training days, more training volume. And we'll start like training 6, 7 days a week, or even there's nothing wrong with 5 days a week if like it actually works for us, but are like trying to squeeze in 5 days a week and it's like your recovery is terrible. We're not getting anything out of you these sessions because you're dragging through each of them. Like we would do better. You mentioned your client Melissa, Natalie. We would do better ultimately if we could just focus more on the quality rather than the quantity. Because when the quality of each of our sessions is good and each of our sets is good, the quantity that we need is less than a lot of people have initially thought. But so often the answer or the answer in people's minds is I'm going to pour like more mediocre quantity on top of what I'm already doing. And like somehow enough of that will get me there when it just won't. It's almost always a quality issue. Cool. All right. Well, on the note, let's wrap it up. Hopefully this was helpful. If you would like to apply for coaching for the team, hit the link in the show notes. If you enjoy the show, do us a huge favor, leave us a 5-star rating and review. Just really helps us grow our reach, and we will catch you guys next time.